Hi everyone, this is Allan McKay, and I'm going to be talking about the topic that I get asked quite a lot, which is, should I go to college to study visual effects? Let's dive in. Okay, so before we begin, a couple of things I wanted to mention. I would love to make this a discussion, so feel free to leave any comments or questions that you have along the way. Feel free to leave as many as you like, and I'll make sure to take time to respond to all the comments under this video. In addition to that, if there's any key takeaways or any aha moments, anything like that that you get from this, again, feel free to leave them in there as well for others. Okay, so that being said, I'm really excited for this video, and if I could ask one favor from you, it would be if you like this video, feel free to click like, as well as if you would share it with others so that way they can benefit from it as well. If you do like this content, then I've got plenty more relating to this topic on my YouTube channel, so feel free to subscribe to my channel as I'll be releasing more content pretty much every couple of days. Okay, so that being said, let's dive in. One of the key things that I think all of us really need to think about is like more the kind of uncertainty with going to college. I think that a lot of us just assume when you're studying something that you need to go get a degree and go to college and do your 1 year, 4 years, whatever it might be to get either a degree or a bachelor or whatever it might be. I think because we have this traditional way of learning in the past, which would be that, you know, you go to high school, then you go to college, and then you use that resume and you go get a job, that is what the norm is these days. And obviously technology has shifted quite a lot. The world is globalized, and it isn't quite the same as it might be in the past. Like if someone was going to do brain surgery on me, then I'd hope that they went to college and I hope that they learned a little bit. But at the same time, I feel like technology, techniques, all of this stuff changes so rapidly, especially in visual effects, that it's very hard for colleges to be able to keep up with what the norm is, what the latest techniques are, what the software is, all of these different things. So because of that, it is a bit of a gamble. Like, do I go to college and pay $40,000 to $100,000? I hear Gnomon is like $108,000, someone said the other day, to pay to go to college to learn the stuff. And on top of that, going and putting in a year or 4 years of my life to go and learn something without really having the certainty they'll actually get a job in the end. On top of that, a lot of people usually when they go to learn, they got to go and relocate to, let's say, Georgia for Savannah College or Sheridan College in Vancouver. Gnomon is in LA. You know, all of these different places, you got to move there, pay for the relocation costs, visas, all these other things. So it's definitely a lot to take in, and it's a massive investment. And is the payoff really worth it in the long run? And like I said before, like, how do you know in the end you're actually going to land a job once you've gone and coughed up $100,000 and put 4 years of your life away to go and learn something? Do you know that you're actually going to be able to take all that and apply that to landing a job next? And I think the other key thing to think about is, what if I could actually get a job right now? What if instead of going and spending 4 years to learn all this stuff, I could actually kind of skip ahead, learn what I need, and then get into school. I get out of school and get into learning in the industry. Okay, so in other words, like maybe you could fast track all this and get a job in 6 months. So I always think if I were to study for 4 years and I'm going to look back and be like, man, if I could get a job in 6 months, like I've gone and wasted 3.5 years. Like where in my career would I be? Because I feel like by the time you spend 4 years working in the industry, you're already at a certain level. You can command a lot more fees. You can get work a lot easier. So you can fast forward through that struggle. So having gone to college, when you finally graduate, you're literally then at square one. You're like, okay, time to make the resume and time to go look for a job. Instead of being like, man, I did all that already, and I'm now already commanding better fees, getting consistency in my employment, all these other things. So that's something that we always got to take into consideration. So I think the key three things that are our main options when it comes to learning is, do I go to college and study visual effects there? Or do I go and I study online for free, going to YouTube and other places like that, doing tutorials and doing it all on my own and not needing to pay for any of that at all? And of course, the third option is, do I go and do paid online courses instead and learn that way? So in other words, finding experts in the industry, paying money to study, but obviously a lot less than you would at college, and kind of having that helping hand while you're doing it all online. I think one of the key things with school, if we were talking about studying if we were to go to studying at a school first, I think some of the key pros to that would be that, first of all, it's structured. In other words, one of the benefits to going to an actual physical college to study visual effects is the fact that you're going to have a curriculum provided for you. So all you really need to do is show up, and you got someone spoon feeding you all the information. So I think for a lot of people that could be really beneficial. Studying on your own is very difficult, and even working from home, anything where you don't have that accountability can really be an issue. So I think in a lot of ways, we get a lot of overwhelm when we're trying to learn a new topic. And anytime I'm trying to learn something new, let's say I was trying to learn photogrammetry, and it's like, well, what camera should I use? What kind of lighting? What's the best program to use? All of these different things. And when you start looking at which program is best, then you start getting into, well, which technique in that program, and it's easy to get very overwhelmed. So instead, having someone there to kind of force feed you bit by bit the information, starting at the very beginning and kind of curating where the information should go, that can be very beneficial to you, opposed to just kind of the whole overwhelm of, here is all the information on the internet, and getting very overwhelmed, paralysis by analysis. So I think that that's a very important aspect to think about. In addition to that, having people holding you accountable, in other words, expecting you to show up, giving you tests to go through, and kind of having that expectation of you to show up every day and be there doing the training, that can also be something that works really well for us as well. So I think that for a lot of us, if we had the luxury of sleeping in, we're probably going to. If we hear the TV going, we're probably going to go downstairs and watch TV for a little bit. Just a little bit of Xbox or a little bit of that. But when we have, like I said, structure and accountability, then for a majority of us, it's going to be very easy to say, crap, it's 9 a.m., got to go to school, get up and go do it. I think that alone is very powerful for certain personality types. And if you're someone that doesn't need that, in other words, you know that you're very self-disciplined, that you can structure and maintain your own day, manage yourself, then maybe you don't need any of that. But I think for a lot of us, we kind of expect that and kind of need that as well. One of the key things I think is really important with going to a college, though, is actually building a network. And I think that is probably the biggest benefit, I would say, is not the teachers, not the structure and the accountability and all that stuff. It's actually the friendships that you're going to make there. And I'm not talking about the fluffy friendship of like, yeah, I met my best buddy there and it was awesome. It's because one by one, each of you is going out there looking for a job. And so not only while you're there, you're building friendships, you're all helping each other, you're able to push each other more. But once you get out of there, you're going to be looking for a job, they're going to be looking for a job. And when one of you gets hired, usually you guys pull everyone else in with you. So I always call this the barrel of monkeys. If you remember that game where there's like these monkey shapes that would tangle up and pull each one of them out with you. I think like every single time I've seen us hire a junior from college for a movie, we brought them in, and then a couple weeks later they're like, oh man, my friend, he is so good at doing this, and this other one, like, she's amazing as well. You got to get them in there before everyone else gets them too. So suddenly they've got their own little clique at your studio because one came in, 2, 3, 4. Suddenly there's like 5 of them in there with you. So what if you get a job before anyone else? You're probably going to bring those people in, but vice versa, you've got all these other people kind of working together trying to land a job, and when they do, they're probably going to bring you in with them. So that's just something to think about, is just the power of networking. You're already doing that at school. You're building these friendships. So if you're sitting next to someone who's really talented and you think they're going to get a job, probably good idea to actually make friends with them as well. But keep that in mind, that is a really effective and really powerful thing. I think that personally, that is probably the most important thing of going to school, is actually the friendships and the network that you're going to build from that. Another key thing is that you're going to be able to talk to teachers. I think that is a big benefit, just because if you have questions, again, like if you don't know how to find the answers to those questions, it can sometimes take days for you to get very demotivated trying to figure out, like, how do I do this thing? And all it takes is you being able to raise your hand and say, hey, I got a question. So that, again, I think is just a really good benefit. Being able to have someone that you can kind of get a little bit of feedback from occasionally. In addition to that, though, I think that, as I mentioned before, with friendships, I honestly think most of the time when you go to a college, and I'm going to talk more about this in a second, but it isn't the teachers that are going to teach you a majority of what you're going to learn. There's usually that one kid who is in there who suddenly, he already knew this stuff when he came in. So he or she is going to like roll up, and for some reason, like they're already doing cool stuff in 3D, and they seem to really get it. They already knew this before they came in there. And I always feel like there's that one person in your class that's going to know a lot more than the teachers, and they're going to have all the answers. And that's usually the person who's going to end up teaching on the side everyone like the real stuff they need to know. Because I'll get into the cons in a moment, but I think that with course curriculums, they don't update as quickly as they should. Whereas like someone who's going there, learning all the tutorials and kind of spitting them out to you and everyone else, that can be a really big benefit. The other key thing about going to college is that you are going to get given a fast computer. You need to be given software licenses, and on top of that, have like a computer lab to work in as well. So I think that that's a massive benefit for a lot of us, is just the fact that we get access to all that stuff. I think that the biggest mistake, especially in visual effects, that I see a lot of students or a lot of people who are learning this stuff, maybe your talent is really good, but it doesn't show because the level of work coming out just doesn't reflect on your talent. In other words, you might have a crappy computer, and because of that, it doesn't matter how talented you are, like your computer is just not giving you the results that you need. So having a fast computer, you can start to dial things up and really make your stuff shine. So again, I think that's just such an important aspect. In regards to school, some of the cons, I think, is the fact that it costs a lot of money. You look at a lot of the courses online, they're a few $100, a few thousand, whatever, but then you go to college, and everyone, like we talk about all the time, that people are in debt for years trying to pay off their college loans because they coughed up $40,000 a year, maybe $100,000. Someone mentioned the other day that I think Gnomon's like $108,000, something like that, and that's US. So for some people, that's triple. So it's kind of crazy how much money you could invest into something. And again, like where's the guarantee that you're actually going to get a job in the end? On top of that, I always think about, well, what if I could actually get a job 3 months from now, and like I just wasted 3-4 years of my life and all that money trying to go and do this. So that's the other thing too, is that you could be spending a year of your life, 4 years of your life going and doing these courses, and then on that you look back and think of like where you could have been. I think about that a lot. Like I think that time is way more valuable than money. And so for instance, you could go and already be in the industry, go through the hard times, go through kind of eating shit, in other words, paying, not getting paid much money, having to struggle to find work, all of that stuff. And that could be the first year of applying. But then you get in, and then you start to get that momentum. 2 years later, you start making really good money. You're making $50,000 a year or more. 4 years in, you're making even more than that. And looking back at like the same version of you that went to college, and you're finally out, you're like, okay, I've finished college, time to start looking for work. And you got all that struggle ahead of you. So to think like how much money you could be earning, how successful you could be within the same time frame, I think that's a really important thing to think about as well. So I think that time, as well as the investment financially, like you'd be paying this off for 10 years, you never know. Those are two factors that I think are the most critical. But for me, the biggest frustration with going to a college is more to do with the teachers. I think that most college teachers are going to be really talented, but there's going to be a pocket of people who maybe aren't. And I've definitely had a lot of experience with this. Before I ever decided to talk about this topic, I spoke to a lot of the best college teachers that I know of to kind of get their opinion on this. And we kind of all agreed, even though they're in the same situation, like they're teaching at college, we all kind of agreed on the same thing, that there are some amazing college teachers that are teaching 3D, teaching visual effects, and then there's a lot who mightn't be as good. Their version of it was a lot more nastier, but I do think that it really comes down to economics. When you have teachers going to a college, typically a lot of colleges are going to pay $25,000. Maybe if they're really, really high end, you get $50,000 a year. Working in visual effects, if you're good, you can make $150,000, you can make $250,000 a year. As soon as I say numbers, there's going to be a section of you or a segment of you that are going to be like, that's BS and we only make this much money. But I'm just saying on the high end, you can make that much money. Obviously, there's going to be people who are making 50, 80, 20, whatever. That comes down to a lot of different factors. But the most important thing is that a lot of colleges aren't able to compete with Game of Thrones budgets of films, like, where you're landing millions of dollars to go work on a project. Colleges aren't able to compete on that same level. So because of that, there's going to be a very selective way of hiring people. It's not only are you capable of doing the job, but can we afford you? And that plays into a factor as well. So you have to keep in mind that a lot of colleges, not everyone teaching you the stuff is actually ever even worked in the industry. Maybe they came in and they never really landed a job, and then they got a job teaching. I've seen a lot of colleges, and again, like, I've got a lot of experience working with colleges as well, so I've seen a lot of students who go straight from being in college to like, hey, you really know what you're doing, do you want a job here? Or you're already helping everyone else around here, would you like a job here? So suddenly the student switches to being the teacher, and I've seen that a lot as well. So again, I don't want to diss on teachers, because I think there's a lot of really amazing teachers out there, but at the same time, there is also a lot of people who are working at colleges who haven't been in the industry, or they had been in the industry for a little bit and it didn't work out or whatever. My whole point with this is just to do your research, like kind of figure out like who are the people teaching the classes, what are their credentials. Because again, I know some guys like Paul Neal, for instance, over in Toronto. He teaches at college, freaking amazing, talented guy, knows a heck more about Max than I do. He's a very knowledgeable guy. So there's guys out there, girls out there who are amazing, but do your research and figure out, well, what's the college like? Who are they typically bringing in as teachers? So Gnomon obviously is a popular one, and it's a mixed bag, but they do try to at least get industry people in to do like night sessions, stuff like that. So, it depends a lot of the time, but, there are going to be places that are focused on trying to get industry people in. So it's always a factor. But one of the other key things, because I've helped build a lot of curriculums for universities. I helped build the Bachelor of Interactive Entertainment in Australia many, many years ago. And the problem with curriculums is that they don't get updated too often. So in other words, the college says, we're going to do a 3D course. And they say, okay, we're going to teach them modeling. We're going to teach them animation. We're going to teach them effects. And what happens at the very beginning? A couple of years back, it's like, okay, well, NURBS is the cool thing. We'll go and teach them NURBS. Okay, and animation, we'll go and we'll teach them how to, animate in, I'm trying to think of something out of date because Maya's still a great animation program, but that's just it. Like, the tools mightn't necessarily reflect what is being used today. And for a curriculum to get updated, it doesn't happen that often. So it's almost expected that the information you're learning is going to be out of date by the time you start learning it. So paying $100,000, devoting years of your life to then going and learning something that probably isn't as up to date as what's going on in the industry is always a bit of a gamble. I feel that also is a negative. Okay, so I'm just going through kind of pros and cons here, but that's also just something to think about, is like whether or not you're learning the best stuff. Like, my personal opinion is that the real learning you do is going to be on the job. I worked from home for the first 3 or 4 years of my career, and then I started working at a visual effects studio, and it was night and day. Like, my first 2 weeks on the job, I learned more in that time than I did in 4 years of studying, or working, I should say, on my own. So being around other people, that's where the real learning begins. And that's why, for me personally, I really want to accelerate the process. I want to get in and start getting results rather than prolonging it going to college. And I think a lot of people do go to college to kind of prolong that, to push it away. They have a little bit of buffer before they got to go into the real world. And again, you're kind of delaying the tough part that you want to get over, the big hump. Okay, so another thing that I think is really important is that this is all colleges in general. This is in visual effects. This is everything. The level of standard is always going to be set quite low. In other words, every college, every course is always designed for everybody. In other words, it's set at a level that everyone can competently be able to do within the time frame they have. So the deadlines are quite relaxed, the level of expectation is quite low, and that's just setting a standard for everyone rather than you. So if you're hungry, if you're out there, if you want that success, then you can get the results in a much quicker amount of time. So when someone sets the bar really low, it's not challenging you to really step up. And I think that's a really important thing. I used to lecture at university. This sounds ridiculous, but when I was 17 years old, I was lecturing at a bachelor level. So I'd been in the industry for about 4 years at that point, I think. 3 years? 3 years. I'd worked on a lot of AAA games like Half-Life, Team Fortress 2, a bunch of stuff like that. And because of that, I was able to RPL, which is recognition of prior learning, to go teach at a university. And that was one of the big frustrations that I had, was that this was the leading 3D college in Australia. And I got frustrated because I wanted the students to get results. I wanted them to be capable of going out into the industry and working. And the one thing that the higher ups at the college would always say is that, just give them the bare minimum. It's easier on them and it's easier on us. And that always stuck with me and always frustrated me. I ended up switching from being a full-time lecturer to saying, well, instead, I just want to teach a beginner night class and an advanced night class. So everyone who was struggling because they weren't getting what they wanted, I could teach them the basics in a way that, the fundamentals that would really click, and I was able to give time to them to make sure that they're on track with everyone else. But then I could teach an advanced class for everyone who wanted to do film, who wanted to do games, and really kind of take their skills to a level that could actually land them work. And so I felt like I could make more of an impact there than the other areas. But that's also because it frustrated me, because they cared more about getting people into the course and making that money, and the government paying them as well, than they did about actually getting people to have the results and have the success and be set up for success for the future down the line. So I think that that's another thing, is that there's no guarantee when you're going to college that you're ever going to get a job. And if you spend 4 years, $100,000, and then you get out there and realize that everything you learned maybe is already out of date and it hasn't helped you get closer to getting a job. Again, I'd rather fast track that and focus on getting the results in the beginning. So for me, that's some of my frustrations with this. And like I said, you're delaying the process. You're delaying getting out there. But I think the key thing to think about too is that most of us go and we study at college because we want a degree. We think that that's going to be the thing that's going to get us the jobs. No one looks at a resume in visual effects and says, oh, they have a degree, let's hire them. No one looks at a piece of paper and says, oh, they have a degree, cool, let's give them the big T-Rex shot with, where the T-Rex has 2 guns and he's shooting everybody or whatever. It doesn't happen, okay? The piece of paper does not matter. The only place that having a degree can help a little bit is when you're going to get your visa to work in another country. Sometimes that can help. But in the end, what we care about is, can you sit down in a chair tomorrow and start doing work? Okay, so your demo reel is going to be the thing that's going to prove that you can do the work. So nothing is more important than your demo reel. A degree does not matter. So if you're going to college specifically to pay 4 years and $100,000 just to get that piece of paper, save yourself the money, get a demo reel instead. Option number 2 is to actually self-study. So that means going online, studying on your own, and you can study for free. You're not paying money, and you're also not locked into a curriculum, meaning that if you wanted, and this is how I think is the better way to learn, because I did this in the beginning. I studied on my own. There was no college. I actually was in an Uber today, and I really wanted to focus and get work done, and the guy was just chatting away. He heard my accent, and he's like, where are you from? And he's like, how did you get into film? Did you go to school for that? I'm like, well, when I started, there was no schools available. I had to learn on my own. We didn't have any internet. We didn't have any of that. And it was very difficult. But the thing is that I did learn on my own, and it meant that I could focus on the things that are really important. I do think it's important to start as a generalist and learn the fundamentals of 3D or 2D first. But at the same time, if I naturally gravitate towards animating characters, why not go and do something that I'm naturally excited about? And that's going to help me down the line stick with it. Because if I'm learning a part of, let's say they're teaching scripting and you're like, I have no interest in learning scripting, and you got to go through a month of that at college and then, know it sufficiently enough that you can get tested and get approved, that's going to slow down your progress. But when you're doing stuff that excites you, like you just went and saw Avengers and you're like, I want to animate Black Panther doing cartwheels or whatever the hell you wanted to do, whatever excites you, you can go and do that. And I think that is going to allow you to stay accountable and allow you to stay consistent with what you're doing. So cutting the fat in a way and being able to go at your own pace. If you're really hungry and obsessed, then you can just go through it much quicker. So I think that in general, studying on your own, it can work out well for you. You can do it for free, which is a good thing because there's so much information out there on YouTube allowing you to go through it. But at the same time, the cons of studying online by yourself is the fact that it is hard. Okay, going and having that discipline to get up every day and have a structured life of today I'm going to sit down, I'm going to do visual effects, and I'm going to stick with it. I'm not going to get up and be like, ooh, time for some Xbox, and what's on the internet? Let me check Facebook real quick. It's so easy to get distracted, and it takes a special kind of person to really stay disciplined. This applies to working from home as well. I remember working on Superman Returns. At one point I was working from home on that, and I remember talking to the owner of Frantic Films, Chris Bond. He owns ThinkBox Software, which makes Krakatoa and all that stuff, Deadline. So I remember Chris telling me, Allan, like, working from home is a really difficult thing. Like, I've done it before, and it's not easy. And for me, I had to build my own ritual. I had to get up every morning, get dressed to work, and I would go to a cafe. And when I came back, I would be at the office. And I had to like mentally kind of build this structure around being able to work. Otherwise, I know that I would end up sitting on the couch for a bit or whatever. And having that discipline is really important. I work from home at the moment, so I have an office that I'm paying stupid amounts of money for, just so that way I have an office to go to, just to answer email and do stuff like that, because it forces me to have some structure in my day. And then I come back to my home office just to do 3D, and here we are, stuff like this. So I think that's important. Is just, if you're studying on your own, it's going to be very difficult. On top of that, you're going to need to have like a lightning fast PC. I think that, as I said before, that one of the things that holds us back is not having a fast enough computer. Sometimes the results that we're doing don't really reflect the talent that we have, or we can't push ourselves further because we're using, an old laptop. Like, people keep asking me all the time, what's the best laptop I should use for VFX? And I strongly think that you shouldn't be picking up a laptop. I keep making the mistake of, I'm actually recording this right now, using this ridiculously expensive 4K laptop with, I'm guessing, I think it's 64 gigs of RAM, all this stuff. And I barely used it when I bought it. It was like a big waste of money. Now I use it to do live streaming. It's awesome. So with that laptop, I don't use it because my desktop PCs are going to be faster and cheaper than a laptop's ever going to be. And it's going to give me better performance. And I don't ever picture myself sitting at a beach doing simulations. So at the end of the day, I'd rather have a sleek, light laptop. I don't have one around right now, but I have like a Microsoft Surface laptop too. And that is my favorite laptop. It's so light, I can carry it on set, I can take all my notes, it works great. And I'd rather invest my time and money into a fast desktop PC, which is far cheaper than a laptop, because at the end of the day, I'm going to be simulating on that, I'm going to be working on that, and it's going to be much faster and capable than a laptop's going to be. And the whole point of having a laptop is that I'm going to be able to, work in a taxi or on a train. You're not doing simulations on a train. My friend Goro Fujita works for Facebook. He was doing virtual reality on a plane recently, which is a first. But in general, you don't want to be mobile. So I think in general, being at home means you have to have a fast computer, have all your licenses. Luckily, most software these days have free student versions, so I think that's a key benefit as well. But I definitely think you've got to be really motivated to push yourself all the time. And on top of that, it's going to be really difficult because you're going to be responsible for finding the solutions to everything yourself. So if you get stuck, it's very easy to kind of shut down and wait a few days before you get back into it because you're waiting for the answer. And if you don't know where to go or you can't find that answer, it's very easy just to completely shut down. So I think that that's something that we always got to consider, is how we can kind of stay motivated, especially when we don't have the answers that we need. And we also got to figure out how to find that information. And that's really tricky as well. Because there is a lot of information on YouTube and a lot of other places, but how do you know that it's the right information? One of my things, which sounds kind of cruel, but myself and a few of the guys at Digital Domain, whenever we're working late, we end up going on YouTube and kind of like looking up nuke tutorials and things like that, just to kind of like, I guess, judge people a little bit. But it's just funny seeing like some people explain like how to do a 2D camera track, and then it's like 20,000 steps more than you need. Or just watching some tutorials where they'll spend 2 hours doing something and then get to the end and be like, it hasn't really worked out, but you get the idea and move on. So again, like, you don't know where you're investing your time. So I always say it's better to find a few resources that you really trust and go all in on them, because otherwise you're going to find a lot of contradicting information that kind of, one person says do this, the other person's like, whatever you do, don't do this. So you just got to keep that in mind, that that's the sort of stuff that can happen quite often. So yeah, I think that is a really critical aspect to this. The other thing that I'll quickly mention is that out of college, building that network was really important. And when you're studying on your own, how do you build a network? How do you find people, friends, as well as people who are looking to get a job in the industry as well? That barrel of monkeys I mentioned that could pull you into a job is not as easy when you're by yourself. So you've got to be very proactive at finding people, whether they're in your city. In other words, doing your research, figuring out like what are the group meetups for your town, so that way you can join in and meet people in those places, or being good at going online on forums, other places like that, and getting to know people there as well. So that's just something to keep in mind at all times, is that you've got to be building a network. So finally, the third option I want to get into, and I think this is the critical one, is studying online. So doing online paid courses. So rather than studying for free, what if you went to FXPHD or whatever the flavor of the month is, but going to places where you'll have experts teaching you the stuff. And I think that definitely is a massive advantage, because you're still studying online, but you're studying from someone who's built a course out the same way that a college would, but specifically on a certain result. And you know for a fact that they're in the industry, they're coming up with that stuff. So I always like to think of it as, for me, like, I would work all day at ILM or something, and then I'd come home at night and be like, man, I came up with this really cool idea, and I'd go and make a tutorial about it, literally, like, as I'm working on that movie. So having the stuff that's the most super relevant and super laser focused, industry specific training, that I think is very powerful. And I think that for me personally, I spend hundreds of thousands of dollars by now on courses learning different things, from business, branding, marketing, whatever it might be, because I'm always wanting to improve. Obviously, books, everything else, because for me, learning is going to accelerate what I need to do. I could either go and figure it all out on my own, or I could have someone who spent months dumping all of that into a course or dumping it all into a book, so that way I can get exactly what I need and consume it. And that's why I always say to learn just in time, not just in case. In other words, I don't go read a book just in case I one day want to learn about law. I read a book specifically when I need to. So, yeah. Anyway, so that's one thing just to keep in mind, is that I think it's really critical to figure out who you're learning from, and when you can actually get experts in to help you with that stuff, that can be really important. The other thing is that by learning on your own, you can learn very selectively. In other words, I could go and learn free YouTube, go learn Max, go learn Maya, Houdini, but then I get to a certain point where you're like, okay, I know how to make a big tsunami, but what are the extra things that I could do to really kind of take it to another step? In other words, how would I be able to learn how to optimize things? How do people in the industry do it? In other words, I know how to make something, but how do I actually push it further and do what people in the industry would do with this? So learning those industry techniques can be really efficient and really powerful for what we're doing. A couple of the key things I'll quickly mention is that I think that paying for an online course versus a college is a steal. Some courses are like $1,000 or whatever to do. I have my online mentorship. The price varies, but let's say it's about $1,500. It's for 12 months, right? So it's an entire year of training, opposed to $100,000, right? But I think one of the key things about any online course is that you want to have access to the people, or at least having that advantage. Like for me with the mentorship, we do live reviews. That's really beneficial just because it means that I get to critique people's work the same way that you would in the industry. We do dailies every morning in the review room, in the theater room on a movie. And I think being able to look at people's work and give feedback, answer questions, critique their work, I think that all of that is really important. So I think that getting that face time with an instructor or with a teacher, that can be really beneficial. Some of the cheaper courses, you're not going to get that access, but maybe you don't need it. But I think it's worth its weight in gold to have that additional access to them. When I'm going to a conference, usually I'll pay more, so that way I can go and sit at dinner with the speakers and get to interact with them, rather than just going and sitting in the audience. Because sitting in the audience is a one-way direction. Being able to actually interact and ask questions and all that is really beneficial as well. So that's just another thing to keep in mind too. In general, I think that if you're smart, you take full advantage of, like, if I'm going to a course, this is a chance where I could actually get to know the instructor and build upon that relationship. Again, in a lot of the courses I've done in the past with like CG Society, places like that, a long time ago now, that's always been really interesting because some of my students who are in my future courses, they originally started out in those ones, and I've gotten to know them along the way. So I haven't checked my chat right now, but I'm pretty confident if I will look, there's probably a few of you being like, "What's up? That was me." But it's so true. So this is your chance, like, to have FaceTime with someone, and then from there be able to continue that relationship. So on top of that, I think one of the key advantages to doing online courses is typically they'll have a community. So again, I'm mentioning my mentorship right now, not to promote it, and I want to be very clear about that, but I will say that one thing that I'm personally more proud of than anything is the live reviews, because we get a chance to interact with everyone. But one thing I'm really proud of is the community that we've built. I think that has been really important. So that's been really important. But on top of that, we do like live meetups. So if I'm in LA, if I'm in New York, Paris, we do a lot over there, and everyone gets together, and it's so cool to see everyone get together, build those friendships. And on top of that, a lot of students who've gone and gotten jobs at Scanline, ILM, Weta, everywhere else, then go and recommend other students, Barrel Monkeys, and hire them to go into their shop as well. Or if they launch their own studio, hire people out of there as well. So I mention that because I'm sure other online courses do that too, but I think it's an important one to look for, because I think that there's a lot that you can gain from doing that. Okay. So in general, having an online community is really important. We've got like Facebook groups, forums, all that stuff, but building friendships, having those peers, that network, as well as doing meetups, stuff like that too, I think in general is really good. One thing that we always say in my courses, and I'm saying this because I think it's an important one, is that I honestly think that paying for a course is really important. I've put out some of my best material, like some of the best content I've ever created, I've put out for free. And I think because it's free, a lot of time it goes right over people's heads. Like they don't appreciate it. And like, I think if you want on Udemy, place like that, they're probably goldmine. Like there's probably some courses out there that are freaking amazing that are worth tens of thousands of dollars that are going for $15. But because it's $15, I guarantee you're not going to do it. So we always say that those who pay attention. And I think that that's a really important factor, because I know for a fact that when I go and I do a course, and like I've done courses that have paid $10,000 to go and study in, and when I've done them, I'm like, I'm going to get my money's worth. I'm going to show up to everything and take full advantage of this. And I think that for all of us, that's really important too, is that if you're willing to put in the money, then you're going to be willing to put in the time. And again, those courses, if they're $15 on Udemy, I probably wouldn't have even like downloaded it. I would have bought it and forgotten about it. And I've done that plenty. I've bought courses for thousands of dollars that I've never gotten around to, and some of them expire. And I'm like, well, that's my fault too. So I think it's also important to take into account that you're the person responsible for learning at the end of the day, and that is an advantage of going to college, is the accountability. Because if you're going and doing an online course, because I do honestly think that there are people who let's say, sign up for one of my courses, and then they just go and sit on their hands, and then they're frustrated that, they're not learning anything. But it's like, I always say that, like, I cannot go to your house and knock on your door and grab you by the ear and force you to go to the computer. So that's on you to always be able to show up and do the work, right? And again, that's why I do think that paying money in a way does become a motivator. But it's also, you're paying someone to kind of curate the information. So in other words, you're paying for someone to cut the fat, and that way you're not learning a lot of stuff that probably isn't necessary. That maybe the junior, like, the free content kind of teaches. So usually you're able to be more selective and get the things that are going to give the results the fastest. Yeah, I think that those are the main things. Like I said before, I think that I've seen so many people go and get jobs from other people, or like, I'm not intentionally mentioning my course, but obviously if you followed my Instagram, all I do at the moment is I'm just posting student work all the time. And I think that that's really important, because for me, this is me just posting, like, check out what this student did today, check out what that one did. And the reason I'm doing that is because I'm so proud of the work that they're doing and they're producing. And I love showing off, like, hey, this one just finished up working on the last episode of Game of Thrones, or this thing or that. But on top of that, what ends up happening is people contact me and say, holy crap, like, that person did the tornado. Are they available? Can I have their details? So for me, I've just found it to be this really easy way to keep posting student work all over my Facebook and my Instagram, the results of what they did in the courses. And then people instantly see their work and say, I want to hire that person. And so it's my way of easily being able to get people jobs without doing any work at all. So I've always found that to just be a really effective way. But, again, it's one of those things that I think in general, it's on you. If you join something, like, I've joined courses just to get access to the instructor, the person, rather than like maybe the information. Maybe I already know it, but I'm just like, if I get some FaceTime with that person, then, I can get to know them, they can get to know me, and then down the line we could do business together. You never know what could happen. So again, there's so many advantages to that. So I think the cons, though, to studying a course online is you got to find the right people. So in other words, do they actually know how to teach? Because you can get someone who's an amazing effects person, but all they do is they go and they sit in their dark room and write code, and they don't really make much sense to any other human being. And so that's the frustrating thing, is that they might be really good at what they do, but they might be terrible at communicating. I've definitely gone and bought, let's say, like a business course, and it's been really frustrating, because I'm like, I cannot keep my eyes open. Like, I'll be wide awake and I sit down and this person starts talking, and then I'm just falling asleep and I'm not retaining anything they're getting. But then there's courses I've paid like $24 for, and it's just been like, a 10-minute course, and I've gotten so much more from that than anything else. So it's just important to keep in mind, like, do they actually know what they're talking about? And also, are they an actual, like, can they teach? Okay, so I think that's like a really important factor to think about. On top of that, I think, it's good to see if they've got any free training available already. I think that's more important, because you can see the level of quality that they put out. So getting any sample lessons, stuff like that. The reason for that is because I know a lot of people in the visual effects industry who, like, my big question is, like, are they holding back? In other words, like, I'll talk to people and say, hey, how's it going? How's your course doing, or whatever? And they're like, yeah, it's good. Like, I'm just doing tutorial quality. It's good enough for them, or whatever. Or that'll do, is another one I always hear. It's like, yeah, that'll do. It frustrates me when I hear friends of mine who are like, yeah, I'm making this new course for CG Society or FXPHD or Gnomon or whoever, and then it's like, cool, what are you teaching? Are you going to teach this? Are you going to teach that? And it's like, no, I'm just teaching tutorial quality. So, in other words, there's a lot of VFX people who they want to teach because, and this is the thing, is like, it's either vanity or money. So some people, they want to teach because they want to get their name out there. So they figure if they get their name on a Gnomon product or whatever, then it'll make them legit. The same way that I guess people will, write a book, because that way they're a published author. And so you got to figure out what their motivation is, because there are a lot of people who are either doing it because they just want to get their name out there, or they're putting out a paid course because they just want the money. And there's nothing wrong with wanting money, but if it is specifically or exclusively, I should say, that they're doing a course just because they want some pocket change, both of these things play into, like, are you really going to give the students, like, everything, every little secret of yours? Because, like I said, a lot of times people want to put out that tutorial quality, and for the people who are paying good money, it's going to be frustrating when the artist is holding back. And I think that there are a lot of people, I think that, like, there is a lot of people out there who are literally teaching visual effects with the intent of not giving away their secrets. In other words, they want to make some money or build their name, but they're intentionally not telling you anything that's going to help you because they feel threatened in their job. They're like, why would I, make myself replaced by students? Like, why would I help them and kind of put my job in jeopardy, right? These are all things that, after having lots of discussions with friends of mine who are in the industry, these are the common things that make me be like, oh man, you're just doing this for the money, the clout, whatever it might be, and you're not there to actually make an impact, then it's not worth the money. So I realize I'm kind of beating this with a dead horse, but I'm hoping that really resonates with you, because it's something to be careful of, is that pick the right people that you know are going to teach really well, and they're in it for the right reasons. So part of that is just to look at the work that they put out there. Does it really resonate? Because they might be freaking amazing at what they do, but they might be good at teaching, or they might not want to genuinely help. So I think that those are things to really keep in mind. That's why I think it's really important to look at student work, and that's why I put out student work. But let's say you're doing Gnomon or wherever the hell it is, like, look at the work they're putting out right now. Look at the results from the students and just see if that's up to scratch with what you expect. Because essentially that's what you're paying for, is the result that you're seeing through their students. So if their students suck, then that is demonstrating the level of output that comes from the training. But if they're really amazing, then that says a lot about their training too. Just keep in mind that at the end of the day, it's still on you to show up and do the work, okay? That's really important. So I think a couple of things to keep in mind is that you got to do your research, figure out, what resources provide what actual services, not what they're telling you, but actually look beyond that, go beyond the surface. But I think that at the end of the day, that the college or studying, whatever, it's a stepping stone to get you into the industry. Like, that is the end result, is you want to get into the industry because that's where your real learning begins. Okay, so I think that that's a really important factor just to think about, is that, this college or, online course, whatever it might be, that isn't going to just instantly make you talented. You got to show up, you got to do the work, and you got to push yourself. And even at the end of the day, all of that is really just going to hopefully get you a job, and then you can start your real learning. Okay, and that's why I think it's more important to look at how to fast track that, how to get ahead with everything. Also, I think with colleges, do any of the, or online courses, like, do they have a relationship with studios? Like, I'll mention my courses, like, we have a very big hire rate from certain studios. So in other words, there's students who've gone to Scanline, Weta, ILM, MPC, Framestore, all the usual suspects. And because of that, bit by bit, now it's, there are certain studios that I have FaceTime value with. I have a relationship with them where I can say, here are my best people from this run, and they get to go in there and hire them. And I think with a lot of colleges, like, there are people who are kind of building those relationships with those studios, and I think that that's important too, because you don't want to go and study something and then walk out into the cold and start applying for a job. You're hoping that someone at that place you're studying, that course online, whatever, is able to say, hey, Digital Domain or ILM, hire this person, they're really talented. And that's going to be worth it as well. I think if I were to end this, I would say a couple of last things I would just say is that I think it's really important also, if you are doing an online course or studying at college, whatever it might be, you want people who can call you on your shit. So in other words, you don't want people to say, like, yeah, your reel's really good. Like, I want someone who's going to tell me, like, Allan, you know what, like, your reel kind of sucks. Like, you got to do all this. Like, it's not good enough to apply for a job yet, or whatever. I'd rather someone push me, be real with me, and not bullshit me, because at the end of the day, like, that's the only way I'm going to grow. If everyone's telling me you're great, then you're going to think that you're great, and you don't need to improve anymore. So I think that that's like a really important thing. Like whoever you go with, whatever you do, is to have someone call you on your shit. I think that that's really critical. Like I said before, I spend thousands and thousands of dollars. Even today, I renewed access to a online membership thing that I have, which is like $3,000 a year. And you know, I pay for courses all the time that are $2,000, $10,000. Most of it spent is $25,000 for an online course, but I do that stuff all the time. And it's because I'd rather find the experts who know what they're doing and what they're talking about and learn from them. And more importantly, if I have access to them, even better. So in general, I think it's the best way to go. Is personally what I do is, you know, I'm always going to learn that way because it's fast. I can do it in my own time. And that way I can just kind of get the results that I need really quickly. So finally, one little segue I'll say is that if you wanted to learn on your own instead of going to a college, one of the big advantages of going to a college, I think that this is going to be the key takeaway I'm going to leave you guys with, is that rather than going to a college and paying $40,000, $100,000 and studying a course, which honestly I feel like a lot of the courses out there, not all of them, there are some great courses, but I feel like a lot of them are going to be crap compared to learning the latest techniques and everything else that you could be learning, unless you find that amazing instructor. And there are ones out there, but in general, a lot of them are going to be subpar, and that's just a bit of truth. But what you can do, and this is something I did when I was 14 years old, I was studying on my own, as I mentioned, but then I contacted a college and said, hey, I want to study at your school. And then after looking through the curriculum, I'm like, I don't want to study at your school, but can I use your lab? And I ended up paying, I forget how much it was. It was a few $100 a month. I don't know what it was. I forget. But I paid a certain amount of money and it would allow me to use their lab. And so instead of using my crappy 486 DX2 60 megahertz, I think it was like 60 megahertz, 4 megabytes of RAM, something like that, really shitty computer to do all of my work, I could actually use a Pentium Pro 200 megahertz with, I think it was 8 megabytes of RAM or 16 megabytes of RAM, something crazy like that. And so in other words, I got to pay money to use the lab, and I'd go in there every day and I'd just be working my reel all the time. I'd go home, I'd work on it there. And I'd find the computers that no one was using. I'd be rendering all the time and breaking all the rules and doing all of that. But it meant that I had access to fast computers, software licenses, everything I needed. And I also had that discipline, or I should say I had that structure of going to a place every day. So not everywhere is going to do that, but to me that was a massive hack, being able to go to a college, use their facilities without needing to use their knowledge, because I felt like I could learn faster on my own than what they were teaching. Like, their version of 3D was like how to make a walk cycle and how to model a clown, which was a sphere with a cone, a little donut for a mouth. It was so bad. Whereas I could go and learn on my own and push myself a lot further. In addition to that, though, that meant that while I'm in the lab, I can still meet people, and I made friends everywhere. I was this 14-year-old kid. Everyone else is like 20, 30 years old. Like, who the hell is this young little kid? But I would go around, I would meet everyone, I'd build all these friendships. Later in my career, like 10, 15 years later, I ended up working with a lot of these people. So that's just something to keep in mind, is that you can definitely get a lot from studying on your own, but going to a place where you can study. And even now, like I was talking with one of the guys at Animal Logic in Vancouver, and he's like, yeah, I want to go to Portland, Oregon, where I am right now, and start like an incubator for VFX people. And I thought that was brilliant, because I've seen it a dozen times where my friends who work on Game of Thrones, a bunch of map painters, they want to get a house together just so they can have like a share office where they go there and they'd all have their own room, they do all their work because they all work from home. This would be their office, but you're around other creative people. You can ask questions if you get stuck. Someone can come along and share some knowledge with you. I think that's been a really effective way to learn. So that's just another one I wanted to throw out there. So I hope you got a lot from this. If you have any questions, let me know. Feel free to leave them in the comments, and I'm going to try to respond to these as I can. But yeah, this has been a lot of fun. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you got a lot from it. If you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to leave a comment below this video. I try to take as much time as I can to respond to everyone wherever possible. In addition to that, if there's any specific questions you have, maybe I can make a video follow-up based on that as well. So on top of that, if you do like this video and you'd like to see more related to this, feel free just to type yes in the comments, something simple as that, just to indicate that you want to see more of this. And that's usually how I judge where I should put my time. So I'd love to hear from you, so let me know. Finally, feel free to subscribe to my channel if you want to get updates on more future videos as they come out, and it would mean the world to me if you could take a chance to like and share this with others. My big question for you is, do you want to study online, do you want to go to a college, or do you want to study by yourself? YouTube is a really great resource for this, so let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Okay, thanks for watching. Get the free visual effects class. This is a free 18-hour class on live action visual effects, covering destruction, fire and explosions, lighting, rendering, all within a real visual effects pipeline. Sign up now, it's free at vfxcourse.com.